The departure. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Interstellar Coalition stretched across an artificial planetoid orbiting the neutral star Proxima Cygni. Thousands of species represented in an architectural marvel of sweeping arches and gravity-defying spires, a testament to what cooperation among the stars could achieve. Today, however, the usual ambient chatter had died to a tense silence. Every representative knew why they had been summoned. Admiral Helena Chen strode confidently down the central aisle, her midnight blue uniform bearing only Earth's simple insignia, a blue and green sphere wrapped in a silvery orbital ring. At 62, Chen's weathered face told the story of decades negotiating among stars and species that regarded humanity as dangerous children. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes, almost black in the ambient light, swept across the assembled delegates. Unlike the ornate ceremonial attire of the other species, the bioluminescent robes of the Vekethi, the crystalline exoskeletons of the Thran, or the phase-shifting garments of the gaseous Nulari, Chen's appearance was deliberately austere. This was not a celebration. Esteemed members of the Interstellar Coalition, Chen began, her voice carrying through the hall without technological enhancement, a subtle human technique that never failed to unnerve the other species. For 97 standard cycles, humanity has participated in this grand experiment of interspecies cooperation. Whispers rippled through the assembly. The Thran representatives' crystalline bodies refracted light anxiously, while the tentacled Jaxiri shifted uncomfortably in their aquatic tanks. We have abided by your regulations, shared our resources, and contributed to the collective knowledge of this body, Chen continued. Her gaze lingered pointedly on Grand Arbiter Zixtera, the ancient Valyrian whose translucent skin revealed a complex neural network pulsing beneath. We have done so even as you've restricted our expansion, limited our technological development, and treated us as dangerous anomalies rather than equal partners. Grand Arbiter Zixtera rose from her gravity-nullifying throne, her 12 limbs arranging themselves in the formal pattern of diplomatic address. The Coalition has only ever acted in the interest of galactic stability, Admiral Chen. Humans advance too rapidly. You take unnecessary risks. Your species' psychological profile is exactly why we're here today. Chen interrupted, causing gasps among the delegates. Interrupting the Grand Arbiter was unprecedented. The United Earth Government and all human colonies hereby formally withdraw from the Interstellar Coalition, effective immediately. The announcement sent no shockwaves through the chamber. Everyone knew this was coming. But Chen noted the subtle signs of relief from many species. The towering Kronax nodded their massive horned heads in approval. The Saphiri delegates' compound eyes blinked rapidly in satisfaction. Only Ambassador Talon of the avian Arisi showed genuine concern, his feathered face displaying what humans had learned to recognize as their equivalent of alarm. The Arisi had been humanity's first and most consistent allies, recognizing kindred spirits in Earth's adaptability and diverse cultures. You fear us, Chen stated simply. You always have. You've disguised it as concern, wrapped it in regulatory frameworks. But the truth remains. Our capacity for innovation terrifies you. Senior Delegate Moore's metallic exoskeleton clanked as he rose. Without coalition protection, you lose access to established trade routes, technological exchange programs, and defensive treaties. The void beyond mapped space is not safe for isolated species. Chen's smile didn't reach her eyes. What technological exchange? You've denied us access to half your advancements, claiming we weren't psychologically ready. We've contributed more than we've received. Her words hung in the air, too truthful for comfortable denial. Many representatives avoided eye contact, their various physiologies displaying universal signs of discomfort. The Coalition has only ever prioritized stability over progress, Chen continued. Humanity prioritizes discovery, innovation, adaptation. These fundamental differences can no longer be reconciled. Grand Arbiter Zixtera's neural pathways flashed in patterns indicating frustration. Your motion has been registered, Admiral Chen. Earth and all human territories are hereby removed from Coalition protection and jurisdiction. Your representatives must vacate Coalition space within 30 standard cycles." Chen nodded once, then removed the silver pin that had marked her as Earth's ambassador for 15 years. She placed it deliberately on the central platform with an audible click that echoed through the chamber. As she turned to leave, Chen paused and looked back. "You'll miss us when the darkness comes." Outside the chamber, Commander Eli Rise waited, his expression carefully neutral though tension pulled at the corners of his eyes. "It's done," he asked quietly. "It's done," Chen confirmed, her shoulders relaxing slightly as the burden of diplomatic restraint lifted. "Set course for Sol. We have work to do." As their ship disengaged from the massive Coalition station, Chen watched the colossal structure diminish through the viewport. Nearly a century of cooperation, frustration, and diminishing hope had ended today. "They believe they're safer without us," Rise observed, standing at her shoulder. Chen shook her head. "Deep space probes have detected anomalies in the outer void. The Coalition refuses to investigate anything that challenges their comfortable understanding of the universe." "So what happens now, Admiral?" Chen turned from the viewport, her expression resolute. "Now we prepare. Without their restrictions, without their rules, humanity will forge its own path among the stars." As their ship engaged its experimental quantum-fold engines, technology the Coalition had forbidden, the news of humanity's departure spread across Coalition space. In ornate halls and sterile chambers, alien leaders raised vessels in celebration of what they considered a peaceful resolution to the human problem. Only Talon of the Arisi returned to his quarters in troubled silence, haunted by Chen's final warning, and what might await a galaxy without humans at its side. 5 years passed since humanity's withdrawal from the Interstellar Coalition. The galaxy adjusted, trade routes reconfigured, diplomatic channels closed. Some Coalition members even purged Earth from their star charts, as if humans had never existed at all. Grand Arbiter Styx meditated in her private chamber aboard the Coalition station. Reports from the peripheral systems filled her neural interface. Unusual energy signatures, missing ships, silent colonies. Troubling, but manageable. The Coalition had existed for over 15,000 years. They had weathered every storm. Her communication array pulsed urgently, an emergency signal carrying the highest priority codes. "Grand Arbiter." The voice belonged to Fleet Commander Vox of Border Security. "We've made contact with something. You need to see this." The neural feed shifted, and Zix felt a chill course through her ancient body. A massive vessel hung in the void, unlike any design in Coalition archives. It resembled a jagged wound in space itself, all sharp angles and undulating surfaces that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Size calculations indicated it was at least 40 times larger than the Coalition's largest dreadnought. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies," Vox continued, his usual confidence absent. The feed changed again, and Zix struggled to process what she was seeing. The beings stood approximately 4 meters tall, their forms seeming to shift between states of matter. They appeared vaguely humanoid but composed of swirling darkness that occasionally solidified into more substantial form. Where faces should be, only pulsing voids existed. "We are the Void Collective." The translation came through Zix neural interface. "Your reality is an aberration. Your existence is inefficient. You will be restructured." "What are your intentions?" Vox demanded. "This is Coalition space. Identify yourselves properly or—" The transmission cut abruptly. Moments later, Vox's command ship erupted in a blast of dark energy that seemed to consume light itself. Where 20 Coalition vessels had been, only debris remained. Over the following weeks, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Void Collective moved rapidly, consuming entire systems. Coalition forces proved ineffective. Their weapons seemed to pass harmlessly through the strange entities, while the Collective's technology disabled Coalition ships with contemptuous ease. Emergency sessions of the Grand Assembly yielded no solutions. The Thran's advanced energy weapons proved useless. The Vekathi's psychic attacks found no minds to influence. The Chronax's legendary battle fleets were reduced to floating graveyards. 2 months into the invasion, half the coalition lay in ruins. Grand Arbiter Zixtera called for the evacuation of the Central Worlds when a communication arrived on a channel that hadn't been used in 5 years. "This is Admiral Helena Chen of the Earth Defense Force. We've been monitoring the situation. We're prepared to assist." Zixtera's pride warred briefly with desperation before surrendering. "The Coalition welcomes any assistance Earth can provide, Admiral. We'll arrive within 24 hours. Chen out." The Coalition leadership gathered anxiously at the designated coordinates. What emerged from quantum space stunned them into silence. Not a ship, but an entire battle station, a massive construct of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields that dwarfed anything the Coalition had ever built. Chen's holographic image appeared before the assembled leaders. "We've been busy," she said simply. "How?" Zixtera couldn't stop herself from asking. "Your species couldn't possibly have advanced this quickly." "We always could," Chen replied. "You just never let us." Within hours, human vessels engaged the Void Collective along 3 fronts. Coalition observers watched in awe as Earth ships implemented technologies they'd never imagined. Weapons that manipulated space-time itself, defensive systems that adapted in real time to collective attacks, and communication methods that couldn't be intercepted or jammed. Most shocking was the revelation that humans had mapped the outer void years ago. They knew what the collective was and had prepared accordingly, while the Coalition ignored the warning signs. The tide turned slowly but inexorably. Where Coalition forces had fallen, human ingenuity prevailed. Humanity's ships moved in chaotic, unpredictable patterns that the collective couldn't anticipate. Their weapons targeted vulnerabilities no other species had detected. 3 months after humanity's return, the Void Collective retreated to the outer void, leaving destruction in their wake. Half the Coalition lay in ruins, while human territories remained largely untouched. In the aftermath, Chen stood again in the Grand Assembly. But this time the atmosphere was markedly different. No ornate ceremonial robes or displays of status, just shell-shocked survivors grateful to be alive. "The collective will return," Chen stated without preamble. "They're regrouping, not retreating. We have perhaps 2 years to prepare." Zixtera, her neural pathways dimmed with exhaustion, asked the question weighing on every mind. "Why did you come back? After how we treated you?" Chen's expression softened slightly. "Because despite our differences, this galaxy is home to all of us. Humanity doesn't abandon its home, or even difficult neighbors, when darkness comes." "What do you propose?" asked Talon of the Arisi, one of the few Coalition allies who had maintained contact with Earth. "A new alliance," Chen replied. "Not a coalition that stifles in the name of stability, but a true partnership that values both caution and innovation. We bring different strengths to this fight. Together, we might survive what's coming." As discussions began for this new interstellar alliance, Coalition species looked at humans with new eyes. What they had feared as dangerous unpredictability, they now recognized as essential adaptability. What they had restricted as reckless innovation, they now understood as necessary evolution. The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps, Chen reflected as she watched former adversaries working alongside human scientists, that was exactly what it needed all along. The reckoning. 10 years had passed since the first Void Collective invasion. 7 since the formation of the Stellar Alliance. Where once the Interstellar Coalition had dominated galactic politics with rigid hierarchies and cautious regulations, the Alliance operated as a collaborative network of species, contributing their unique strengths toward common defense and mutual advancement. At the heart of this transformation stood New Terra Station, a massive human-designed habitat orbiting the reconstructed Coalition capital world. Unlike the ornate, ceremonial architecture of the old Coalition headquarters, New Terra embodied practical human efficiency blended with touches from a dozen Alliance species. Arizi atmospheric gardens spiraled through open spaces. Thran crystalline power conduits channeled energy beneath transparent walkways, and Vekathi bioluminescent panels provided ambient lighting that adjusted to different species' visual needs. In the central command hub, Admiral Helena Chen, now bearing the silver streaks of a decade's additional experience, studied holographic representations of deep space sensor readings. At 72, she moved with the measured grace of someone who had survived enough crises to know that panic solved nothing. The neural implant at her temple, technology once forbidden by Coalition regulations, pulsed softly as it processed multiple data streams simultaneously. "They're coming back, aren't they?" The voice belonged to Grand Mediator Zix Terra, who had replaced her title of Arbiter along with the Coalition's dissolution. Her once brilliant neural pathways had dimmed with age, but her mind remained sharp. "Yes," Chen confirmed, expanding a section of the hologram where space itself seemed to ripple and distort. "Our quantum sensors are detecting the same dimensional instabilities that preceded their first appearance. Larger this time, more organized." Zix Terra's neural patterns flickered with what humans had learned to recognize as resignation. "We've implemented every defensive measure possible, rebuilt our fleets, constructed the shield network, evacuated outer colonies. What more can we do?" Chen's expression remained impassive, but her eyes reflected determination. "We fight, and this time we understand what we're fighting." The Alliance War Council convened within hours. Representatives from 27 species that had survived the first invasion gathered around a massive circular table. No raised tiers or ceremonial positions as in the old Coalition. In the Alliance, all members stood equal. Commander Eli Reyes, now Director of Alliance Intelligence, stood beside Chen. At 56, the creases around his eyes had deepened, and a jagged scar ran along his jawline, a souvenir from a close encounter with a void entity during the First War. "The collective isn't simply invading," Reyes explained, activating the central holographic display. "They're attempting to reshape our reality to match their own." The display showed the bizarre physics within void collective vessels, spaces where conventional physics broke down, where matter existed in multiple states simultaneously, where time flowed differently. "They don't see themselves as conquerors," Chen added. "They see themselves as correctors of a cosmic anomaly, our universe." Ambassador Talon of the Arisi ruffled his feathers, now streaked with gray, in agitation. "How does this knowledge help us defeat them?" "Because now we know they're not invincible," Chen replied. "They're simply following different natural laws, and we've spent 10 years learning to manipulate those laws ourselves." The hologram shifted to display a new class of Alliance vessels, sleeker than standard designs, with unusual geometric patterns embedded in their hulls. "Project Threshold," Reyes announced. "Ships capable of operating at the boundary between our physics and theirs. Weapons that don't just pass through their matter, they disrupt the very principles that allow their matter to exist." Skepticism rippled through the assembly. The Kronak Supreme General's massive form shifted uncomfortably. "These vessels look primarily human in design." "The principles are human," Chen acknowledged without apology. "The implementation required all of us. Thran crystal matrices to channel energies no standard conduit could contain. Vekathi binaural interfaces to process calculations too complex for standard computers. Milari phase-shifting technology to stabilize the quantum fluctuations." She looked around the table, meeting each delegate's gaze. "This is what the Alliance was built for. Not just species coexisting, but technologies and ideas merging to create something greater than any of us could achieve alone." 3 days later, the Void Collective emerged in force. Not a single massive vessel as before, but a fleet of them, each one capable of destroying entire planetary systems. They materialized simultaneously at 7 critical junction points throughout Alliance space, bypassing the early warning network. Chen stood on the bridge of the EE's Prometheus, the first of the Threshold-class vessels. Around her, a crew comprised of 6 different species worked with practiced efficiency. The ship hummed with energy as systems human engineers had only theorized about a decade ago, now powered up for actual combat. All Threshold vessels report ready, Admiral, announced First Officer Kiravex, her Thran crystalline form refracting the bridge lights. Alliance conventional forces are in supporting positions. Chen nodded. Remember your training. Conventional physics doesn't apply once we engage the threshold drives. Trust your instruments, not your senses. The Prometheus and its sister ships accelerated toward the nearest collective vessel, a massive construct of shifting darkness that seemed to both absorb and emit light simultaneously. As they approached, reality itself appeared to warp and distort around them. Threshold drives engaged, the Malari navigation officer announced, his gaseous form swirling anxiously within his containment suit. The sensation was indescribable, as though the ship and everyone aboard were simultaneously existing and not existing. Through view screens that no longer showed conventional space, they could see the true nature of the Void Collective. Not solid vessels, but knots in the fabric of reality itself, places where the natural laws of their universe have been overwritten with something alien. Target the dimensional anchors, Chen ordered, fighting the disorientation. Just as we practiced. The Prometheus fired weapons that defied conventional understanding, not energy beams or projectiles, but focused distortions in spacetime itself that unraveled the complex knots maintaining the collective's presence in normal space. Across 7 battlefronts, Alliance forces engaged the collective with this new understanding. Conventional ships provided defensive screens while Threshold vessels struck at the very foundations of the collective's existence. It wasn't combat in any traditional sense, more like cosmic surgery, excising malignant distortions from the fabric of reality. The battle raged for what felt like both moments and eternities. Time itself became fluid in the boundary zones where the fleets engage. Alliance vessels took heavy losses. 3 Threshold ships were lost entirely, their crews and structures apparently erased from existence. But the strategy worked. One by one, the massive collective constructs began to unravel, their anchors to normal spacetimes severed. On the Prometheus, systems failed under the strain of operating in physics they weren't fully designed to withstand. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red as Chen received reports from the other fronts. Last collective vessel destabilizing, Kiravex reported, her crystalline form showing fracture lines from the stress of existing in boundary physics. But our drive system is failing. We may not be able to return to normal space. Chen studied the tactical display, a swirling mass of data that no longer resembled conventional spatial relationships. Can we establish communication with the collective before they're completely gone? The communication officer, a young human working alongside an Arisi technician, looked up in surprise. Possibly, but why would we? Do it, Chen ordered. Moments later, the main screen filled with the shifting, void-like appearance of what passed for the collective's leadership caste. Their forms seemed more stable than others, the darkness more defined. Why do you unravel us? The translation came not as sound, but as concepts directly into the minds of the bridge crew. Reality must be corrected. Not corrected, Chen replied. Respected. Your reality and ours can coexist without either being destroyed. The void entities shifted in patterns suggesting confusion. Impossible. Physics cannot sustain contradiction. Not contradiction. Complexity. Chen gestured to her diverse crew. Different species, different worlds, different ideas, all existing together not despite their differences, but because of them. The same can be true of different realities. A long silence followed. Though in the boundary zone, the concept of long had little meaning. We will consider, came the response finally. Withdraw your unraveling. We will withdraw our restructuring. Chen looked to her tactical officer, who nodded confirmation that collective vessels were indeed beginning to disengage from normal space without being forced. Threshold drive stabilizing, Kuravex reported with surprise. They're helping us. They're considering a different approach, Chen corrected. Just as we did 10 years ago, when we realized cooperation achieved what isolation couldn't. As the Prometheus limped back to Alliance space, the Void Collective retreated not to the outer void as before, but to the dimensional boundaries from which they had come. Whether they would return remained an open question, but for the first time, the possibility of communication rather than conflict existed. 3 weeks later, Chen stood again before the Alliance Council, this time to deliver not warnings of war, but proposals for peace. The collective has established a permanent dimensional anchor at these coordinates, she explained, highlighting a distant region of space. Not a military presence, but what we might call an embassy. They wish to learn about our reality rather than reshape it. Skepticism and hope warred in equal measure among the assembled delegates. Can we trust this overture? Asked the newly appointed Kronax representative. Trust isn't built in a moment, Chen replied. But understanding begins with communication. We've sent scientific teams to study the boundary physics. They've sent entities to observe our multiple species cooperation. Both sides are learning. As the council session ended, Grand Mediator Zixtera approached Chen privately. Her once brilliant neural network had dimmed further during the strain of the second conflict, and she moved with the care of one who knew her time was limited. I remembered your words, she said quietly. From the day humanity left the coalition. You'll miss us when the darkness comes. You knew something was out there. Chen nodded. We detected the dimensional anomalies years before our departure. The coalition refused to investigate anything that challenged established understanding. You could have left us to our fate, Zixtera observed. Many in your position would have. That's not who we are, Chen replied simply. Humanity doesn't abandon others, even those who feared us, when facing extinction. Zixtera's neural patterns flickered in what Chen had learned was her species' equivalent of a rueful smile. We feared what we didn't understand about you. Your unpredictability, your constant drive to push boundaries, your willingness to take risks. We saw these as dangerous flaws. And now we understand they were always your greatest strengths, Zixtera acknowledged. The very qualities that saved us all. As they looked out over the rebuilt Alliance headquarters, where once separate species now worked together in ways the old coalition could never have imagined, Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The path forward remained uncertain. The Void Collective's intentions were still not fully understood, but something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. We're all explorers now, she said quietly, of space, of possibility, of better ways to exist together. That's the real legacy of these wars. Not victory over an enemy, but victory over our limitations. In the distance, a ship departed for the Dimensional Boundary Station, the first official diplomatic mission to the Void Collective. Aboard were representatives from 12 Alliance species, including humans. They carried with them not weapons, but knowledge. Not demands, but questions. The darkness had come, just as Chen had warned. But in facing it together, the galaxy had found not only survival but evolution, a new understanding that transcended the old boundaries of species, of physics, and of possibility itself.